Hi everyone, Amy here, and today I'm going to show you how to use your shimmer or your pigment powders with your stencils. Now I'm using an awesome new stencil called Whirl Around. It's from the July release at A Colorful Life Designs. It's chock full of awesome geometric stencils, so be sure to check out the rest. But I do have this liberally coated with some pixie spray on the back, and I have some watercolor paper here from Arteza, and it's cut down to 6x6 just so that it kind of covers or the whole stencil is able to kind of show in this design. Now I'm just lining this up here as straight as I can on the panel, but it doesn't really matter because I will end up cutting it down some. But I use my brayer to really press that stencil down so it's stuck well onto the watercolor paper. Now you can do this without pixie spray, but I will tell you, especially with detailed stencils, you'll get a better effect with the pixie spray. So here's a couple photos of the finished cards that I'm going to make for you today. You can see I have a monoprint one. I'll show you as well how I made this card. But basically this is one of my absolute favorite techniques to do with stencils. I have these Nuvo shimmer powders. I have Solar Flare, Blue Blitz, and Storm Cloud. Now I particularly love these three colors together, but you can see here I'm just tapping little piles of this powder throughout. You don't want to squeeze the bottles. If you squeeze them, you're going to have a huge mess on your hands. So just gently tap and lay down little balls of this powder all throughout your design. Just kind of no rhyme or reason here, just kind of evenly distributing the different colors because they are going to kind of blend together once you introduce the water. So just lay down a nice amount. You can always add more later as you go. But basically I just have this little spray bottle of water and I start spritzing all over this panel. Now this is watercolor paper. You could maybe do this with Bristol Smooth, but you definitely want to have a paper that can handle a bunch of water. So I wouldn't really do this with, you know, a regular sort of cardstock, just because I don't think it would hold up very well and it would warp a lot on you. So this is a really nice watercolor paper that I have, probably the nicest that I have in my stash, from Arteza, and I will link that in the video description box below. But I'm using this little teeny tiny brush to kind of blend in any little bits that aren't saturated. You don't want to leave anything in its powder state because then it won't stick. It'll just kind of brush off. So make sure you go through and kind of wet or use a little brush to kind of take care of any of the little piles of dry powder still. And then I'm just using a paper towel just to kind of mop up any excess of the water that's kind of pooled throughout the stencil. So I just give it a minute. It doesn't have to dry. I just give it a minute to really soak into the watercolor paper, and then I carefully remove the stencil. And isn't this magic? I mean, it's just, it blows my mind every time. The way these pigment powders kind of blend with each other and the way they dry, it's like magic. Anyway, I don't want to waste that extra pigment, so I'm just using another piece of A2 size watercolor paper, and I'm using my brayer, and I'm kind of holding it down. You'll see that's because I have pixie spray, so it will kind of stick to this paper towel here, so you want to kind of hold that down. But you can create an extra awesome panel with this cool monoprint effect. So it's an optional step, but a fun way not to waste the pigment. And here's how it looks when it's dried. You can see the shimmer really when the light hits it. It's kind of hard to show in the photographs, but it has such a wowza effect. Now, if you've worked with this stuff before, it can kind of brush off a little bit on your fingers. So I haven't used any sort of fixative, and I've done okay, but just bear that in mind. You may get a little bit rubbing off, or maybe rubbing onto a different card if you have a bunch of them stacked. So just bear that in mind. Now here I'm making a 6x6 card base. You have to use 2 pieces of cardstock because obviously an 8.5 by 11 you wouldn't be able to do it. So I have one cut to 6x6 and then one cut to 6.5 by 6, and then I just use my scoreboard to create a little flap and some score tape just to kind of add that other piece directly to the front of it. So this is a way that you can make a card base if it's too big to actually use you know, a regular single piece of cardstock. So this is my solution. I don't know if there's an easier or a better way to do this, but this worked for me. So had to pause my Roomba here. Of course, it decided to start while I was, you know, making this video. But anyway, sorry if you heard that in the background. But here I'm just using this score tape here as well on the back of this panel. I did cut down the finished panel to slightly smaller than the card base itself, because I didn't want to lose this gorgeous design. I mean, you could absolutely cut it down smaller in size to, you know, A2 size or something like that, but the design is just so pretty that I didn't want to lose any of it. So just using that score tape, it's a nice strong adhesive. It'll help kind of keep it down so there's not, you know, any bowing with it being, you know, a watercolor paper that tends to bow. And then I wanted to use this Celebrate die cut from Catherine Pooler. There's gold or warmer tones in this pigment powder, and I didn't have any of this particular die cut in gold cardstock. So I did cut a handful of those, which I will use for the 2 cards that I made today, and then I'll put the extra in my sentiment book. So if you've seen that, that is my storage solution for storing all of my sentiments. Now I decided I want to go a step further because this whole card is kind of extra, if I'm honest, with the size and everything else. So I thought, why not? And I have this adhesive backed foam, and I run the die cut through, or the die through my embossing or my die cutting machine, and I'm just using some liquid glue, and I'm basically going to take the gold cardstock and glue it right on top of this blue adhesive backed foam. So not only will it give it some nice even dimension, but it'll have that nice pop of blue when you look at it from the side. So this is one way to do it. You can glue it right on the actual foam sheet itself like this, but you can see I did struggle a little bit. So if I were to do it again, I would probably just pop the sentiment out. And it'd probably be easier just to kind of line it up that way. So there's 2 different ways to do it. Just right from the sheet itself, gluing it down, or just pop the whole sentiment out and then liquid glue it and attach it together. Either way, the end result is the same. It's just dependent on the die cut and how fussy it might be. So I'm just poking out all the little innards here, but basically I have a glorified sticker now because there is adhesive on the back of that foam, and I'll be able to just remove that backer and put it right down directly onto the card. So I'm just figuring out composition, how I want to do it. I don't really want to do it right in the center because I don't want to cover up that cool it looks almost like a pinwheel to me. Anyway, I don't want to cover up the center, so I kind of move it in the top left, and it's got this gorgeous blue from the side, and I have some blingage here. It's little random bits of gold sequins and flat back sequins with no holes and things like that, and I thought they were a perfect match to the color scheme here. So I'm just using some liquid glue and my jewel picker to lay down little pieces of this in odd numbers throughout the composition. So I have 3 on the bottom and 2 on the top. Here's this finished card. You can see there's tons of shimmer from the shimmer powder, and it is, you know, a 6x6 card. So as you know, if you ship something in a square envelope, you will get charged extra postage, so bear that in mind. Or maybe just put it in a larger rectangular envelope instead, and then maybe bypass that additional charge. And then here is an A2 size card. I pulled this together with that monoprint panel that I made with the residual ink and used a stitched edge rectangle die, and the same sentiment, I just glued it down directly onto the panel and used some of that same blingage. So super fun technique. Bust out those pigment powders or your shimmer powders if you have them, and try them with your stencils. Super fun. So thanks so much for watching. I'll check you next time. Bye.